The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 331. Kiran wrapped his arms gently around Snow's waist. Snow felt as if all the strength was being drained from her body. The weaker she grew, the more nervous and afraid she got. Were they going to do it? However, she quickly calmed down when she remembered that she having her period. She had nothing to fear. Without hesitation, she turned around and kissed Kiran boldly. Kiran meant to fluster her a little. Serves her right for trying to gain the upper hand over him by establishing a house rule. So, he was astonished when she kissed him first. It was too good of an opportunity for him to miss. He immediately responded by sealing her mouth with his. Although Snow was tense, it was not her first time, and she soon relaxed. All Kiran could taste was her softness and sweetness. He immersed himself in the moment, allowing himself to forget everything else. To annoy him, Snow began to squirm playfully. Kiran felt like a volcano that was about to erupt. Without warning, Snow bit down hard on his tongue. Gah! Kiran yelped and pulled away from her lips. Snow giggled gleefully. I'm going to find my angel now. Angel? Kiran was baffled. Snow fished out a white menstrual pad from her purse. This, my winged angel. Only then did he recall that it was her time of the month. He glared at her. You sly woman! La la la! Snow flipped her hair over her shoulder smugly, singing a taunting little tune. Kiran looked irritated, but he was, in fact, joyful. Snow loved him deeply, and he loved her too. That was all he needed. Although he did not know the reason behind his father and Zara's relationship, he secretly decided that he would devote his heart to Snow. In the end, he did not go to see Lilian again. On one hand, they had already agreed to a showdown the following night. On the other, he had not decided what to do with the purse left behind by his mother. The Simmons family's residence. Zachary returned in a miserable state. Marshall was unnerved and frightened. Given how badly his father had been beaten, it was clear that the Ludwig family was livid. Dad, what should we do? What can we do? It's not like we can kill Kiran. Zachary's expression was a mixture of frustration and indignance. Marshall looked at him. Dad, since Kiran's so powerful, why should we? Quiet! Zachary scanned their surroundings cautiously as if he was afraid of being overheard, fear and agitation visible in his eyes. Marshall immediately shut his mouth and stared at his father wordlessly. Zachary was silent for a moment. Under the current circumstances, we have to be obedient. We'll play our due role by studying Dragonsmount. If we can't offer any value, we'll die. He shot Marshall a scornful look. Too bad you're an ignorant and incompetent fool. If you were a little more intelligent, I could teach you my ways, and our family would be able to live and make money in peace. His gaze darted upstairs. All you do is fool around with women. His displeasure with Lily was evident. Marshall pursed his lips and said nothing, but his expression revealed his indignance, for his father himself was also a womanizer. Zachary glared at him. You're too short-sighted. Marshall remained silent. You've always been a lazy good-for-nothing, Zachary continued hotly. If you'd paid attention in history class, you'd know this story. Once upon a time, there was a general sent by his king to conquer a neighboring state. Before the campaign, he shamelessly asked the king for more forces and huge rewards for future victories, just to placate the king's fear that he'd start a revolt against the throne. Marshall eyed him incredulously. So what? What did that story have to do with him? Zachary snorted. If I didn't pretend to be a womanizer, how could I gain their confidence? How could they trust me with the investigation? Marshall inhaled sharply, astounded by his man's shrewdness. Then, what should we do now? We continue working for Power Hub Investment Group without worrying about anything else, Zachary said firmly. What about Kiran? He's hot on our heels. I even feel like my life is in his hands now, Marshall said glumly. An infuriated Zachary raised his hand to hit him, but in the end, he put it down. Your brain is not for eating or fooling around with women. Marshall flushed. Since Kiran has killed Hans, Power Hub Investment Group will definitely send their people after him. His death is only a matter of time, Zachary said fiercely. Are you sure he can be killed? He's so strong. I'm not sure, but I do know one thing, Zachary went on. What? Marshall asked impatiently. Even if Kiran commits murder in Bayville, he won't kill innocent people, and he won't kill you either, Zachary said confidently. Why? Marshall was still puzzled. What does Kiran really want now? Zachary asked, his expression cryptic. To avenge the York family. And why does he want revenge? To help the York family rise again. If he wants his family to rise again, he can't do something that'll incur the hatred of everyone in Bayville. He didn't even massacre the 3 big families, let alone people like you and me, Zachary pointed out. Marshall was instantly enlightened. When Kiran had asked him to choose between paying $1 billion or becoming his ally in exchange for his father's recovery, he had picked the former. From that incident, it was clear that Kiran wished to win the hearts of people. "I didn't think of it that way," he mumbled. "From now on, don't get involved in anything else. Just do whatever we're asked to do. If you have time, spend it on improving sales for your Blooming Cream series. That's the most important thing. As for any business between Kiran and the Ludwig family, we keep our noses out of it." After a brief silence, Zachary added, "I plan to enter Dragonsmount in 3 days. This time, it'll be a long stay too. Remember to prepare all the daily necessities for me." "Don't worry, Dad," Marshall answered. Zachary waved his hand in dismissal, and Marshall left. He was already beginning to contemplate how to enter Dragonsmount. Dragonsmount was the key to everything. Meanwhile, Gregory arrived in Bayville, but he did not check into a hotel. Instead, he went around Dragonsmount to examine the traces left behind by the battle. Finally, he gazed in the direction of Bayville and murmured, "Looks like Kiran's much stronger than I thought. As the saying goes, the younger generation will surpass the older in time. Unfortunately, he will die by my hand." His gaze was sharp, and bloodthirstiness surged in them. The following day went by peacefully. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Kiran, together with Onyx and his men, headed to Neptune's Cove Karaoke. Chapter 332. Neptune's Cove Karaoke was bustling with activity. It was a world of madness. It was a world for the curious. Many in Bayville were anticipating the battle that was to take place that night. The transfer of Neptune's Cove Karaoke's ownership from Onyx's gang to a group of women had undoubtedly been the most shocking piece of news to recently surface in the city. An agreement to a battle 7 days later had been made, and because of it, many in Bayville had been bursting with excitement. The result be revealed tonight. A hush fell over the bar when Kiran and Onyx's gang appeared. The next instant it erupted in cheers. "Onyx! Onyx!" The growing shouts and enthusiasm of the crowd were enough to blow the roof off. The entire bar became a sea of euphoria. Onyx glanced at Kiran. The latter nodded. "I'll leave the rest to you." Onyx inclined his head confidently. "Leave it to me, sir." Just when Kiran was about to find a good seat, an expressionless Lauren approached him. "Come with me." Kiran merely cocked an eyebrow and followed her without a word. He was not too worried about the impending duel. If the York family could not overcome this small hurdle on its way to the top, how would it be able to face greater enemies in the future? For that reason, Kiran remained calm and poised. He followed Lauren all the way to a private room in the middle of the second floor which overlooked the stage. Inside, Lilian stood facing away from the door with her hands behind her back, gazing at the buzzing scene below. After showing Kiran in, Lauren backed out of the room and closed the door. Kiran did not move. He remained at the door, his eyes trained on Lilian's figure. Lilian felt his gaze boring into her back, making her somewhat uncomfortable. She frowned at him over her shoulder. "Are you done staring?" "Nope," he replied coolly. Lilian knitted her brow in irritation. You're looking at the view downstairs, but you're quite a view yourself too, so why can't I look at you?" Kiran replied serenely. "Don't be frivolous," Lilian snapped, flushing slightly. "Then let's talk about something less frivolous." Kiran's expression grew serious. "Like what?" Lilian demanded coldly. "Let's break off our engagement," he declared solemnly, his gaze intent. "Engagement?" he found out. Lilian flinched, her eyes flashing with intense anger, which eventually morphed into misery. She curled her lip. "Me, engaged to you? Are you crazy? I know Zarianis is my mother." Kiran continued to stare at her unwaveringly. Lilian's eyes grew wide again. How did he find out? She fought to mask her panic with feigned composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. Whether you admit it or not doesn't matter. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about is the termination of our engagement. I already have a wife, and her name is Snow Xander." Kiran placed extra emphasis on Snow's name. An inexplicable ache seized Lilian's heart, and a hint of bitterness flickered across her lovely face before she resumed indifference. "I don't know what you're babbling about, but let me remind you that, as the leader of the Imperial Dragons Foxgate, I'm also obliged to kill you to avenge Wolfgate. That's your business, but I can promise to spare your life 3 times, Kiran said evenly. Pfft! A derisive yet ravishing smile played on her lips, but her voice was dispassionate. "You're not capable of killing me. I'm the one sparing your life now. Whatever floats your boat." "Anyway, I just wanted to get this out of the way," said Kiran. "Is there anything else?" Lilian seemed impatient to dismiss him. "I want to know if my mother's dead or alive." He regarded her steadily. "No idea." Lilian refused to answer. Kiran fixed her with a hard look. "Don't try my patience. I can tolerate other things, but not this." "So what?" Lilian's temper flared. Who did he think he was, commanding her to terminate the engagement and then getting mad at her? Even if they were going to break things off, she should be the one to initiate it. A used guy like him was not worthy of her. I want answers right now. Without warning, Kiran lunged for her. She sidestepped his hand effortlessly and scoffed. Don't you think it's rude to touch a woman so casually? And what are you going to do about it? Unbothered, Kiran took a swing at her again. Successfully irked, Lilian retaliated by delivering a right knife hand strike to his wrist. He did not attempt to dodge and continued to reach for her. Her palm struck his wrist with a dull thwack. Lilian felt her entire arm go numb from the impact. Kiran paused for a fleeting moment before grabbing at her clothes. In a fit of anger, Lilian suddenly thrust her body forward, aiming her bosom at his hand. Kiran hastily moved his hand to the right before it could come into contact. Lilian swiftly swerved out of his reach, and they brushed past each other. Lilian's cheeks were pink, chagrined that she had resorted to an indecent trick to avoid being caught by Kiran. She had not expected him to be such a formidable fighter. Despite Kiran's aggressiveness and desire to learn more about Zara, he refused to stoop to something as despicable as grabbing Lilian's intimate parts. It's obvious that you're no match for me, he told her. You have a few tricks up your sleeve, that's all. When it comes to the joyful odyssey, you suck. She narrowed her eyes at him scornfully. It's just a dumb piece of music, Kiran responded with equal contempt. Like you have the right to judge. What makes you think you can be so conceited when you can't even get to the third level? A dark cloud passed over Kiran's face, and he glared at her menacingly. Today is the first time I spare your life. You think you can kill me? She sneered. Stop bragging, Kiran frowned. Don't make me attack you again. Go ahead. Show me what you've got. Lilian gave him a disparaging smile. Woo! Kiran lashed out at her again, this time aiming for her right arm to restrain her. Lilian was dismayed and infuriated by his blatant lack of gentleness with her. Instead of dodging his outstretched hand, she chuckled disdainfully. You want to touch me that badly? Be my guest. With that, she stepped forward to meet his palm straight on. Kiran was startled by this turn of events. He quickly backed away from her. Spotting an opening, Lilian immediately flung her hands into the air. Chapter 333. Whoosh. Soft silk threads shot out from Lilian's sleeves. Silk threads. Really? Who did she think she was, Spider-Woman? What damage could they possibly do? Unfazed, he reached out and grasped the silk threads to break them. However, he failed, for they were surprisingly tough. Twang! Suddenly, the silk threads produced a dull twang. It was the sound of the joyful odyssey being played on a harp. Kiran was stunned. The silk threads seemed to be functioning as the strings of a harp. Was Lilian able to control her vital energy to pluck them? Incredible. The next second, his body was permeated with a deluge of sounds and air currents. Once again, he was shocked. He quickly gathered his thoughts and calmed down, then focused all his mind on neutralizing Lilian's attack. However, he found that he could not break free of the threads. Kiran studied them. They were merely woven loosely around his hand. It seemed he could break free of them with a shake of his wrist. He tried once more, only to fail yet again. It was as if there was a huge suction force between his skin and the threads. Kiran furrowed his brow. It's like witchcraft. Lilian's lips curved into a charming, cruel smile. It's just a small obstacle, and you're already calling it witchcraft? You're such a loser. What did you say? Triggered by her insult, Kiran used his other hand to tug at the threads, only for them to cling tighter to his skin. This frustrated and maddened him. With a sweep of his hand, a dagger appeared in his palm, and he raised it to slice the threads. Cut them if you want to die. Panic flashed across Lilian's face. Kiran's dagger halted and he shifted his attention to her. A blush appeared on Lilian's stunning face, but her eyes showed a fierce glint. Glowering at him, she continued, These are threads of fate. Cut them and see what happens. Threads of fate? Once again, Kiran was startled. His master had once told him that he had planted a seed of fate in his body. It was a love seed that could save him when his life was in danger. Back then, he had asked what it was, but his master refused to elaborate. His only instruction was to get along well with the person who possessed the threads of fate. Kiran had never thought that person would be Lilian. After hesitating for a moment, he put his dagger down. Lilian retracted the silk threads and shot him a look of disdain. Loser! Kiran stared at her, his face grim. Why do you have the threads of fate? That's none of your goddamn business. Now get out. She dismissed him haughtily. Kiran's eyes bore into her. What secrets are you keeping? Tell me. Who the hell do you think you are? Why should I tell you? Lilian curled her lip. If I hadn't been afraid, you'd cut the threads. If the person before me wasn't you, I'd have killed you 1,000,000 times. Kiran York, you're nothing but an amateur to me. If you can master level 7 of the Joyful Odyssey, I'll tell you the secrets about Zara and the threads of fate. You... The veins on Kiran's forehead bulged as he seethed at her insult. I was just stating facts. You can choose to believe them or not, Lilian said coldly. Fine, just you wait, Kiran snarled. Try to change my mind about you, or I'll kill you with my own hands. Lilian snickered. Don't worry, Kiran spun on his heel to leave. Beautiful women are bad luck, you know. I advise you to refrain from hanging around with women all the time, Lilian remarked mockingly again. Be jealous all you want. My heart only belongs to one woman, and that woman is my wife, Snow, Kiran retorted icily. You think too much. I'd never be attracted to a useless man like you. After a pause, Lilian added, You're such an imbecile. I can't help worrying about your future children's intelligence. An air of menace emanated from Kiran as he bristled, but he managed to contain it in the end. He threw the door open and stalked out. Once he was gone, Lilian slammed her hand down on the table, shattering it to pieces. Idiot moron! Stupid pig! When Kiran returned to the first floor, Onyx's gang was about to go on stage to commence the 7 battles. He waved his hand and shouted, Let's go! We're giving up Neptune's Cove karaoke! His command doused Onyx's gang's enthusiasm like a basin of cold water. They had vigorously prepared themselves for one hell of a fight, only for it to be called off abruptly. More importantly, Kiran was giving up Neptune's Cove karaoke, even though it was the York family's property. Everyone looked at each other, then at Onyx in bewilderment. Onyx knew right away from Kiran's frosty expression that something unpleasant had happened, so he signaled to his confused followers. Let's go! Clomp, clomp. At once, they stopped talking and followed him out. Those who had come to Neptune's Cove karaoke to watch the fun were dumbfounded by the situation, for the drama was already over before it had even begun. They had arrived in high spirits, only to be dashed. It had been said in the upper circles that this was the York family's first battle in its journey, so how could they retreat in such an anticlimactic manner? Was Kiran actually a loser and not the god he was purported to be? Harboring all sorts of thoughts, the crowd watched Kiran and his men disappear. Calm returned to Neptune's Cove karaoke long after they were gone. However, many people got up and left, all interest in being there lost. After exiting the karaoke bar, Kiran instructed Onyx to bring his men back to Xander Corporation, then drove alone and aimlessly through the streets. A long drive later, he somehow found himself at the foot of Dragonsmount. As he gazed at the dark mountain, his heart suddenly felt heavy. What secrets did this mountain hold? Who exactly had the York family offended to cost so many lives for Dragonsmount's sake? Kiran sat in the car, lost in thought. Since you're here, why don't you come out? Just then, a deep, elderly voice came from the front of the car. Ironically, it gave Kiran a sense of relief. Finally, there was a strong opponent who he could vent his anger on. Without turning on the car lights, he opened the door, stepped out, and regarded the old man standing proudly before him. The man was about 60 years old. His jet-black hair was proof that he was rather fit for his age, but he exuded an air of cold brutality and condescension. It was none other than Gregory. Kiran arched an eyebrow. Are you from the Imperial Dragon or Power Hub Investment Group? Tell me your name before I send you to Hades himself, Gregory snorted. Don't get too cocky, Kiran York. If I weren't cocky, I couldn't have wiped out Wolfgate and killed Hans Ludwig, Kiran retorted sarcastically. Gregory was enraged by his arrogance. In his eyes, Kiran was destined to die by his hands. How could Kiran be so conceited? He was just asking for death. He roared, I will kill you and avenge Mr. Hans Ludwig. Whoosh! Like a rock, he launched himself into the air and shot toward Kiran. Chapter 334. Whoosh! Gregory's movement sent a violent gust of wind through the surrounding flowers and trees. The tranquil mountain instantly erupted into a chaos of squawking birds and running animals. Gregory's figure zoomed faster and faster through the air like a meteor streaking across the dark night sky. His murderous aura seemed to condense the air around him into an invisible force, with Kiran as its target. Kiran did not move, but silently watched Gregory lunge at him. Crackle. Upon contact with Gregory's murderous aura, insects that were darting around in a blind panic burst apart, one after another. Sounds of the exploding insects filled the air as their carcasses vaporized. This boosted Gregory's confidence. Ice Blast! This was a secret technique that he had been practicing all his life. Lately, he had achieved a breakthrough. He could transform his energy into a sword that cut down everything around him, and he could also decrease the surrounding temperature instantly. causing the body to freeze and explode under extreme pressure. That was what killed those insects just now. His lips curled into a wide smirk when he saw that Kiran no attempt to dodge, thinking that it was because he was scared stiff. "Kiran York, you can finally reunite with your family," Gregory shouted loftily. His words were accompanied by a punch right on Kiran's body. An overwhelming wave of energy surged from him into Kiran, but the latter did not show any sign of resistance. Gregory's face relaxed. Kiran's internal organs had probably been frozen, and soon they would. "Is that all you've got?" Kiran's eerily calm voice spoke. With his fist pressed against Kiran, Gregory was unable to take another step forward. A look of shock crossed his face. He could hardly believe his ears. "You..." "I was just testing how strong Power Hub Investment Group's fighters were. Don't tell me this is all you've got." Kiran's tone was even, yet his contempt was undisguisable. Gregory's features contorted as his rage boiled over. "Don't get cocky with me, kid." His clothes bulged as he poured all his internal force into Kiran's body. Kiran felt an icy pressure envelop him, gradually freezing him from the inside to the outside. His clothes frosted over first, followed by his hair. It looked as if his entire body was about to turn into an ice sculpture. Gregory was pleased to see Kiran's clothes and hair beginning to freeze. He breathed a sigh of relief, feeling more assured of his own abilities. "Pretending to be better than you are is basically asking for death." He cackled maniacally. He began fantasizing about the worship and adoration he would receive upon returning to Power Hub Investment Group with the news of Kiran's death. The best supplements, the finest treatment, the hottest women. He could see the life of indulgence and luxury he had always dreamed of right before his eyes. He would obtain all of this by quashing Kiran. Kiran's death was a fantasy he could not wait to imagine. "You're right," Kiran drawled, "but you're the one asking for death." Crack. With a quivering motion, the ice on his body shattered and fell to the ground in pieces. Gregory was stunned. Bam! Kiran's hand shot out and grabbed his neck. Dragonsmount doesn't accommodate the ghosts of the wrongly accused. "You deserve to die!" Gregory's eyes widened as if looking death itself straight in the eye. He cried in panic, "Please don't kill." Before he could finish, his eyes rolled back into his head, which then lolled to the side. Kiran had snapped his neck. He let go, and the body slumped onto the ground with a thud. With one last shudder, Gregory drew his final breath. Kiran had strangled him to death without wasting a single second. Although he had many questions about Power Hub Investment Group, his meeting with Lilian had soured his mood, leading him to finish Gregory simply and brusquely. Gregory stared up at the dark sky for the last time. Everything good and wonderful in the world was fading from his reach. The only thing that he could touch now was death. Kiran took out a packet of powder and sprinkled it on Gregory. The stench of rotting flesh instantly permeated the air as the corpse decomposed before his eyes. Kiran gazed up at Dragonsmount. "Even if hell awaits me on Dragonsmount, I'll uncover the truth. The Imperial Dragon, Power Hub Investment Group, and all of the York family's enemies. All will die." Boom! A deafening clap of thunder split the sky. It was as if the wandering ghosts of the York family were wailing in his ears, lamenting their agony and hatred. With red eyes and clenched fists, he turned around, got in the car, and drove back to his home in Marina Breeze Court. Meanwhile, Wendell was waiting for the news that Gregory had eliminated Kiran. There was a distant look in his eyes. The head of the Ludwig family had not yet been informed of the news of Hans's death. If he delivered it now, he might be severely scolded or even killed. Hans was the Ludwig family's only son. There might still be hope if he killed Kiran first and then admitted his fault to the Ludwig family head. He knew Gregory was going to attack Kiran tonight. He glanced at his watch and saw it was already past 9, but there was still no news of Kiran's death. Was the duel at Neptune's Cove karaoke not over yet? After pondering for a moment, Wendell instructed someone to call Zachary to ask about the duel, and learned that Kiran had withdrawn before the fight had even begun. What about Gregory? A bad feeling crept into Wendell's heart, and he immediately dialed Gregory's number. His number was unreachable. His phone had corroded along with his corpse. Wendell's face turned grim. After hesitating, he called his subordinate in Bayville to track Kiran's location. He was informed that Kiran had returned to Marina Breeze Court but had also been to Dragonsmount before that. His mind went blank. Had Kiran killed Gregory? The possibility filled Wendell with alarm and terror. Was Kiran that powerful? After contemplating for a long time, Wendell decided he could no longer bear the responsibility. With trembling hands, he located the number and dialed it. A woman's voice answered the call almost immediately. "Mr. Lopez? Miss, we're facing a bit of a situation here." Wendell chose his words carefully. "Situation? she repeated impatiently. Mr. Ludwig went to Bayville to propose to Snowzander and H.E. Wendell stammered, not daring to finish his sentence. He what? The woman snapped. His legs were broken and his head was crushed by Snow's husband, Kiran York. Wendell's clothes were drenched in cold sweat. And you're still alive? The woman's voice was cold. Forgive me. I sent Gregory to kill Kiran, but he failed too. Wendell sounded like he was on the verge of tears. Useless trash, the woman hissed. Trembling, Wendell waited for her next words. Chapter 335. Is this Kiran York you speak of related to Bayville's York family? The woman asked icily. He's the family's sole survivor and the son of Titus York. Wendell breathed a sigh of relief and answered cautiously. The sole survivor? The woman knew about the York family, but Kiran's existence surprised her. He's very powerful. He wiped out the entire Wolfgate and trampled over the 3 big families. Now he just seizes everything he wants in Bayville, And what? The woman was irritated by his hesitation. He wants you too. Wendell's clothes were practically soaked in sweat. The Ludwig family's daughters were all outstanding beauties, as well as highly independent and capable women. The eldest daughter was married, but it was rumored that she had never slept with her husband. The reason was simple. She was so intimidating that the poor man was too scared to sleep with her. He wants me? Angered, the woman spat scornfully. Does he think he's worthy of me? Or does he have a death wish? The frightened Wendell kept quiet and waited for her orders. She was silent for a moment. Are you capable of killing Kiran York? Beads of sweat covered Wendell's forehead. He was extremely on edge, and he was very aware that a negative answer would lead to his immediate death. If he said yes, he might have a chance of survival. Don't worry, miss. I can kill him. He decided to bite the bullet and take a gamble. Kill him within 3 days or don't come back. With that, the woman hung up. Wendell felt all his energy leave his body, but he was secretly grateful that his life had been spared. Regardless of his abilities, he needed to confront Kiran and fight him to the death. Without wasting another second, he gathered his men and hurried to Bayville. On the other end of the phone, the woman's gorgeous face was full of arrogance and disdain. She did not bother to inform her father of the news. In her eyes, killing Kiran would be child's play. She gnashed her teeth with hatred at the thought of Kiran having designs on her. Meanwhile, Kiran had returned to his apartment. Snow was curled up on the couch with a stuffed bear in her arms, watching TV while waiting for him. When she saw him, her eyes lit up as if he was her whole world. She jumped onto the floor barefooted and scanned him from head to toe for any signs of injury. Since you're so curious about my body, do you want me to take off my clothes and show it to you? To soothe her worries, Kiran suggested teasingly. Snow was relieved to find that he was unharmed. Despite the fuzzy feeling in her chest, she responded to his teasing haughtily. Sure, go ahead! I demand to see it. Kiran stroked his nose and shot her a look. Perv. Scoundrel. She refused to be outdone. Perv. Scoundrel. Peft. Both of them burst out laughing. Here comes the scoundrel! Kiran stepped forward and scooped her into his arms. Snow wrapped her arms around his neck and planted a smacking kiss on his forehead. Thank God you came back safely. That simple sentence touched the softest part of Kiran's heart. Love did not need grand promises. It just needed to be genuine. This was Snow's genuine love. Don't worry. I'm always the one who does the killing. Kiran comforted her with a smile. Did you win back Neptune's Cove karaoke? Snow asked. Kiran shook his head. Snow widened her eyes in astonishment. You lost. Kiran shook his head again. Snow fixed him with a frosty look. You just gave it to your fiancé like that? Kiran embraced her firmly. You're my wife. Other women don't matter to me. Don't sweet-talk me. Sulking, Snow struggled to break free. Kiran only hugged her tighter. It's the truth. After a moment of silence, he said, It's a good thing the duel didn't happen today. Otherwise, even if I could come back to you, I'd have been injured. Gregory's ice blast had been far from weak, but his luck had run out when he encountered Kiran. Whoa, what do you mean? Snow's jealous expression vanished and was replaced by anxiousness and worry. Kiran was quiet for a while before saying, Lilian's a pretty strong fighter. I could beat her in a duel, but it also cost me a lot of energy and give others an opening to catch me off guard. Others? Like who? Snow looked concerned. A stranger tried to kill me near Dragonsmount, but I finished him off, Kiran replied calmly. Snow clung to Kiran. Don't scare me like that, okay? I almost had a heart attack. Kiran raised his hand and caressed her cheek. Don't worry, I'm fine. I'm guessing attempts on my life will spike for some time before falling. What do you mean? Snow blanched in fear. After I destroyed Wolfgate and killed Hans, there's no way the Imperial Dragon and Power Hub Investment Group won't retaliate. The easiest way is to take violent revenge, so they'll concentrate their forces on that. If I can overcome all their attacks, I believe they'll cool off soon. After all, it's pointless for them to stake their lives fighting someone ready to risk it all like me. Kiran analyzed the situation with a frown. But can you do it? Snow asked softly. As long as you're safe, I'll be fine. Kiran smiled. Don't worry about me, Snow said bravely. In 3 days, Zachary will enter Dragonsmount, and I'll follow him secretly. I may find out more information about Dragonsmount, and I'll lure out those in the Imperial Dragon and Power Hub investment group seeking revenge. Kiran revealed his plan. Won't it be dangerous for you to go alone? Snow was still apprehensive. I told you just now. As long as you're safe, everything will be fine. Kiran offered her another smile. Snow's heart was warmed by his reassurance, but her eyes clouded with misery and remorse. Will I be a burden to you? Silly girl, you're my wife. How could you ever be a burden to me? Kiran held her closer. But you're always worried about me, Snow said woefully. I was just analyzing the current situation for you. I've already come up with a solution. What solution? Go back to my family. Snow wanted to know. The Xander family won't protect you anymore. Why? Is it because I'm your wife? Kiran inclined his head. If I can't even protect my wife, how can I rebuild the York family? Snow nodded silently. Don't worry too much. I've found a safe place for you. Where? Neptune's Cove Karaoke. What? Snow stared at him dubiously. Doesn't it belong to Lilian now? Kiran nodded. That's exactly why it'll be safe for you to stay there. Isn't she from the Imperial Dragon? Snow asked. She is, but I believe the Imperial Dragon can't control her, so letting her protect you is the safest option. Will she? I'll talk to her tomorrow. Kiran was confident. Snow was doubtful about the plan, but she nodded quietly so as not to trouble Kiran further. Wait for me in bed. I'll join you once I've taken my shower. Kiran grinned. Screw you! Snow smacked him lightly, then turned and ran into the bedroom, blushing. Kiran headed into the bathroom with a smile on his face. Chapter 336. Snow returned to her room and laid on the bed, her stomach in knots. When she thought of Kiran's request for her to wait for him in bed, she was both happy and embarrassed. She tossed and turned, all kinds of thoughts swimming through her mind. She suddenly realized that despite the danger he was in, Kiran cared more about her than himself. That was true love. A man like him deserved to be treasured and loved forever, so why not cherish their good times together? With that conclusion in mind, Snow's eyes crinkled with bliss, and the corners of her mouth lifted. She carried her blanket to Kiran's room and crawled into his bed, waiting for him to come in. Although she had sneaked into his bed before, she was doing it openly this time. Despite her nervousness, her heart was filled with happiness. However, she was still shy. She wrapped her blanket around herself tightly and closed her eyes, pretending to be asleep. After coming out of the shower, Kiran went directly to Snow's room, thinking she was there. His mind went blank when he found it empty and even the blanket gone. Had she been abducted? Snow! Kiran shouted anxiously as he backed out of the room. Snow, lying in his bed, felt her heart swell with affection when she heard him calling her name. Still, she did not respond and waited for him to come in. The next instant, Kiran rushed in and found her in his bed. Heaving a sigh of relief, he remarked teasingly, "You crawled into my bed!" Snow's heart soared joyfully, but she retorted indignantly, "You crawled into mine first. I was afraid a certain perv would get into my bed again, so I moved to another one." Glancing around the room, she said, "This house belongs to me, which makes this room mine too." Kiran had calmed down, but Snow's stubborn excuses were so adorable that he could not help teasing her. "In that case, since you're my wife, shouldn't this house belong to me?" As if. "Why don't you buy a house and let me stay in it?" Snow rolled her eyes at him. "I like getting what I want without lifting a finger." Kiran flopped down on the bed. "In the worst case, I'll be your kept man. It doesn't matter anyway. You're getting more shameless day by day." Snow pouted. "Why shouldn't I be?" Kiran was unfazed. Only an idiot would care about shame in front of his wife. "Then what do you care about?" Snow wanted to know. "Your body. My wife's body is the best and most important thing I need." Kiran leered at her. "You're disgusting." Like a lamb cornered by the big bad wolf, Snow clutched the blanket around her and yelled, "You climbed into my bed, so it's only fair that I climb under your blanket." Grinning, Kiran tugged hard at Snow's blanket. Snow squeaked in feigned alarm and tried to resist him. However, Kiran managed to force his way under the covers, and he immediately touched her soft skin. He eyed her and could not help thinking to himself, "This girl's choice of clothing, or lack of it, is really bold." Snow's cheeks were pink with embarrassment, but she said triumphantly, "Anyway, you can't do anything to me because I'm on my period now." Reminded of this particular problem, Kiran chuckled at Snow's mischievous expression. Home base is out of the question, but as for the other stuff... Hey, what are you doing? Touching you. Perv. Ha ha ha. Don't fight back when you're clearly enjoying it. You're so sleazy. Well, you did call me a perv. Like children, they fought playfully in bed, their happiness visible in their eyes and on their faces. Ultimately, Snow dozed off in Kiran's arms like a kitten. Kiran's heart swelled with emotion. He would face everything bravely for the York family and the one he loved. At Neptune's Cove karaoke. "Boss, we received an order from the higher-ups for you to kill Kiran York," Lauren told Lilian. "Tell them that killing is the work of other organizations, and Foxgate is only responsible for collecting information." "Rules are rules," Lilian refused coldly. Lauren looked doubtful. "Is that really okay? Their opinion of us might get worse. So what? Why should we care about what they think? Besides, this order wasn't issued by the big boss, just people who want to take advantage of us," Lilian explained calmly. "What about Kiran?" Lauren asked tentatively. "I don't care what happens between him and the Imperial Dragon. I will focus on my own business and nothing else." She paused and looked at Lauren. "Tell the girls to practice the joyful Odyssey together. I want them to put their hearts into it and improve their skills as soon as possible." "But boss, that's the former leader's secret technique." Lauren reminded. "When she was alive, maybe, but she's dead. Why should we be so rigid?" Lilian's voice was emotionless. "Yes, boss," Lauren answered. Lilian motioned for her to leave. When she was alone, she let her anger show on her face. "Stupid Kiran York! Look what your recklessness got us into." She glanced up at the ceiling. "Am I really going to be stuck at the last 2 levels of the joyful Odyssey? Is this really my limit?" She seethed with bitterness and resentment. When Kiran awoke the next morning, Snow was still sleeping. Gazing at her tenderly, he kissed her forehead. Snow woke up to the sight of him. She stretched out her slender arms and hooked them around his neck, whispering sweetly, "Morning, honey. You can sleep longer. I need to head out now, but I'll return to you once I've dealt with everything." Kiran hugged her. Snow nodded. "Be careful. You are the one who should be careful." Kiran patted her delicate body. She immediately got the hint and said smugly, "Well, I'm safe now." Piffed. Both of them burst out laughing. They knew it was only a matter of time before they took things to the final stage. Kiran left the house and contacted Serena. He was relieved to learn that she was already setting up a company. Kiran drove to Neptune's Cove karaoke. When he got there, the doors were closed. This was the quietest time of the day after a busy night. He opened the doors and strode in. It was still inside. Only the smell of cigarettes and alcohol hung in the air, telling of the madness that had taken place there the previous night. Kiran could not help being curious about Lilian. She was a beautiful woman who enjoyed peace and quiet, so why had she chosen this place? Was this her idea of tranquility? Unable to figure it out, Kiran shook his head. He took the stairs to the second floor and walked to Lilian's room. Before he could knock, it opened with a whoosh, as if blown by a gust of wind. Lilian's breathtaking face appeared before his eyes. Chapter 337. Her beauty was ethereal. It was a beauty that could bring the world to its knees. Her jet-black hair was tousled, but it only added to her allure. Her eyes sparkled like an autumn lake, and her skin was as white as snow. The woman of every man's dream was standing right before him. Kiran was stunned. Like a lotus flower blooming in clear waters, her beauty was natural and pure. She was simple and unadorned, yet not many in the world could reach the height of her loveliness. Even if Snow was there, none of them could outshine the other, for they each possessed a unique charm. Lilian flipped her silky hair over her shoulder and asked softly, "What are you doing here so early in the morning?" She glanced at the other rooms, hinting at him not to disturb those who were still sleeping. "Can I come in?" Kiran asked. "Sure." Lilian moved out of the way. Kiran entered the room. The sunlight shone through the beige curtains, filling the place with warmth. A faint feminine fragrance wafted in the air. "Are you already desperate for another woman even though you just cuddled with Snow?" When he did not speak, Lilian said mockingly, "I'm here to ask for your help." Kiran changed the subject. Lilian pointed at the mirror. "You should look at yourself in the mirror first. Who do you think you are to deserve my help?" Ignoring her disparaging reply, Kiran continued, "Zachary will enter Dragonsmount in 3 days. Every time he goes in, he'll conduct research for some time and produce a report. I'll shadow him this time, but I'm worried about leaving Snow alone." Taken aback by his disclosure, Lilian arched an eyebrow. "There's no point telling me all that. I don't care. Snow's my wife. I have to protect her. After a pause, Kiran said, now that I've dealt a blow to the Imperial Dragon and Power Hub Investment Group, they'll want to get violent revenge on me. I told you I don't care. If this is what you're here for, you can leave now. Lilian dismissed him coldly. Ignoring her demur, Kiran said confidently, I know you won't sit back and do nothing. You, Lilian quivered with anger. In your dreams, idiot. That's the situation. I'll send Snow here in 3 days. Kiran turned to leave as if he was only there to inform her of his plan. Not a chance. I won't help you. Lilian was so irritated by Kiran's attitude that she lost her indifference and became like a petulant woman whining to her lover. That's just how it's going to be. Kiran was convinced that he had won her over. Kiran, are you that determined to make me protect Snow? Knowing that she could not refuse, Lilian asked seriously. Kiran nodded. Yes, fine. If you can reach level 4 of the Joyful Odyssey within 3 days, I'll agree to protect Snow until you come back. Lilian fixed him with a hard look. If you think we'll fall in love with each other or something after I master the Joyful Odyssey, you can forget it. Our paths will never converge, and Snow will always be my wife. Kiran's tone was unwavering. Lilian secretly swore at him. What was this perv thinking? As if she would ever fall in love with him. Don't read too much into it. I'll never get feelings for you. As for the engagement you mentioned, I don't know anything about it, so it's none of my business. That's even better. Kiran was glad. I'll make sure to master level 4 of the Joyful Odyssey. His joyful expression sent a pang shooting through Lilian's heart. Was he really that eager to break off the engagement with her? She stared at him intently. If Snow did not exist, would he fall in love with her? How was she in any way inferior to Snow? However, this only boosted her ego. Chapter 338. She would never fall for him. She decided to cast aside the engagement and her promise to her master Zara. Kiran noticed the flicker of emotion in her expression, but he did not dwell on it. I'll be back in 3 days to let you check my progress and bring Snow here. Lilian gazed at his retreating figure without a word. With every step he took, her face grew colder. In the end, she clenched his fists and gritted her teeth, wishing she could sink her fangs into him. Kiran exited Neptune's Cove karaoke. Lilian struck out with her fist, and the harp in the room produced a series of wrathful explosion-like sounds. The corners of Kiran's mouth quirked at the noise. Lilian was a proud woman. Women like her could only be conquered by showing greater dominance. Snow was a perfect example. As Kiran recalled how she had taken the initiative to climb into his bed, a happy smile spread across his face. As for Lilian, he knew he could trust her to be his right-hand woman for his future revenge. Onyx's gang was already in the middle of their training when he arrived at Xander Corporation. After offering them some pointers and treating Frank's condition, he headed to the Simmons family's residence to meet Zachary. The gates to the mansion were closed, but it was brightly lit inside. Wendell's party had arrived in Bayville. He had come to the Simmons family's residence right away to learn about the current state of affairs in the city. Zachary and Marshall stood before him like obedient dogs, waiting for him to give his orders from the master's seat. Zachary, what's a good way to kill Kiran York? Wendell asked. Zachary had already figured that Wendell's attempt to assassinate Kiran had failed, or he would not have come here. Wendell's question further proved that he had no confidence in killing Kiran. Zachary did not know what to do either. However, he answered in an ingratiating manner, Mr. Lopez, I think we should rely more on brains than brute force. Wendell was greatly pleased to hear this. Brute force was the last thing he wanted to rely on after losing Gregory, who had been his biggest ace. Tell me more. Zachary groaned inwardly. He did not have any good ideas. He had only made a casual comment to divert Wendell's attention. However, being the cunning old fox he was, he quickly thought of a way. Mr. Lopez, I suggest you arrange for someone to remove all the secret records of Dragonsmount from Bayville University's Schuyler Library. Put them somewhere with explosives buried, lure Kiran there, and get rid of him and the books at once. Wendell's eyes lit up at his suggestion. Laughing, he rose to his feet. Good idea. I'll arrange for someone to carry it out today. I'm rooting for your success, Mr. Lopez. Zachary immediately flattered him. This is why I need the help of a local. You know this place well. Wendell cast an approving look at him. Are you ready for the trip to Dragonsmount? Zachary nodded with a simper. Everything has been prepared. This time, I'll go in alone too. Wendell inclined his head. Work hard and I'll try to get my master to grant your family more money. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Zachary's eyes brightened greedily at the mention of money. Our lives will be much easier if we manage to kill Kiran York. He's an abominable pest, Wendell snarled in fury and exasperation. I'm sure you'll succeed, Mr. Lopez. The future of the Simmons family is in your hands. Zachary showered him with all the compliments he could think of. Suddenly, the alarm of the surveillance camera inside the house sounded. "Kiran York is here," Marshall cried in horror when he saw the screen. "Retreat!" With a shout, Wendell jumped out of the window with his men and fled. Chapter 339. They took to their heels at lightning speed, all poise and grace forgotten. Zachary's fawning smile froze, and his eyes turned as big as saucers. Why were they running from Kiran like mice from a cat? Had Kiran scared them out of their wits? The thought of that put Zachary on edge even before Kiran appeared. At that moment, Kiran strode in. "Mr. Kiran?" Marshall was much more at ease facing him than facing Wendell, and he stepped forward to greet him with an ingratiating smile. Kiran scanned the mansion calmly but found nothing unusual. Wendell and his men had escaped out the other side fast enough, so they avoided being discovered. Having regained his composure, Zachary laughed heartily and looked at Kiran. "I would like to thank you for saving my life that day, Mr. Kiran. I would have been a goner if it hadn't been for you." Kiran's cool gaze swept over his face, and he said indifferently, "I can decide your fate without so much as lifting my finger, so don't read too much into it." Zachary was taken aback by his condescension. Instead of accepting his gratitude, the latter had threatened him. Kiran continued evenly, "I heard you were back, so I came to see you. Do you know why I'm here?" "I'm afraid not." Zachary shook his head solemnly. "I'm here to ask two things." Kiran settled down in Wendell's seat as if he owned the mansion. Once again, Zachary was shocked by his lack of regard for them. Even Wendell had not acted this way. Kiran was indeed a menace. No wonder his son was afraid of him. With great vigilance, he offered Kiran a respectful smile. "What would you like to know, Mr. Kiran?" Kiran went straight to the point. "First question, who appointed you as administrator of Schuyler Library?" Zachary was visibly startled by the question. After pondering for a moment, he said, "The York family." "Who exactly?" Unsatisfied, Kiran pressed on. "The master," Zachary answered. "Why did he appoint you?" Kiran's gaze bore into him. "I was working for the York family at that time, so I was probably a safer candidate. Plus, I was a diligent worker and was appreciated by the master." Zachary met his gaze. "That's all?" Kiran cocked an eyebrow incredulously. Zachary nodded. "Yes. Since the library was already granted to Bayville University, why were you still tasked to guard it?" Kiran's voice grew cold and demanding. Zachary shook his head thoughtfully. "I'm not sure." "You're not sure?" Kiran stared at him, his face devoid of expression. Zachary shook his head. "It's true." After a moment of silence, Kiran said, "Then, let me ask you the second thing. What is it?" Zachary breathed a sigh of relief. "Why are you associated with Power Hub Investment Group?" "After the York family fell, they came to me and offered a hand in my family's development." "That's simple?" Kiran snickered. "Yes," Zachary replied seriously. "What have you done for them all these years?" Kiran demanded, his eyes trained on him. "I worked as a lecturer in Bayville University's Department of History, and then established Blooming Group under my family's name. That's all." Zachary did not mention his thesis. Kiran chuckled. He stopped talking and stared at Zachary, an ominous aura beginning to radiate from him. Although Zachary was unsure of Kiran's intentions, he stared back at him with vigilance and determination. "I have two things to tell you." Kiran's tone changed abruptly. "Go ahead," Zachary said calmly. "The first thing is, from now on, you're not allowed to take a single step into Dragonsmount, or else." Kiran glanced around the mansion wordlessly, then at Marshall and the other people present. Immediately their blood ran cold as if they could feel the eyes of death on them, and they looked like their souls were about to leave their bodies. Zachary was also scared, but he regarded Kiran steadily and continued, "What's the second thing? Tell me how you keep in touch with Power Hub Investment Group." Zachary's complexion turned ashen with panic. His contact person was Wendell. If he revealed Wendell's number, he would be dead meat. As for promising to stay away from Dragonsmount, although he could not say no to Kiran, he could always go in secret. "Don't waste my time," Kiran warned. "I only have the number of one of their butlers." After hesitating momentarily, Zachary decided he did not want to be killed. "Give it to me." Zachary walked over to the table and wrote down Wendell's number, fervently hoping the latter would not pick up. "Call him now and put him on speaker," Kiran reminded. Zachary looked conflicted. He had given the real number, but he had not expected Kiran to demand him to make the call immediately. He hesitated and did not move. "Is there a problem?" Kiran asked icily. "No." Zachary took out his phone and called it. Wendell had just left the neighborhood when he received the call. Thinking Kiran was gone, he immediately answered it and asked, "Is Kiran York gone?" Kiran raised an eyebrow at his words, and a smile formed on his lips. "You're in Bayville. Who are you?" Wendell was immediately on his toes when he heard his voice. "I'm Kiran York, the person who wants to kill you," Kiran responded with cold arrogance. "Zachary, why did you call me in front of him?" Wendell felt betrayed. Zachary was just as dismayed. He had not expected Wendell to speak the instant he answered the phone. Right now, he was caught between a rock and a hard place. "Since you're so badass, come back here and let me kill you," Kiran taunted. "Don't get too cocky, Kiran York, I'll kill you for sure," Wendell declared fiercely. "Really? I'm at the Simmons family's residence right now, you know. You ran away like a scaredy cat, and now you're talking big over the phone?" Kiran exposed him on the spot. Wendell was utterly humiliated. "I didn't know Power Hub Investment Group was keeping useless scum like you." "All you do is run away with your tail between your legs," Kiran said mockingly. "I refuse to argue with an incompetent fool like you. We'll see who's the victor on the day you die." Wendell tried his best to sound intimidating. "So, you're the one who sent that old man who could perform Ice Blast yesterday?" Kiran suddenly asked. "What happened to Gregory?" The instant the question left his lips, Wendell regretted it. Gregory was definitely dead. Why else would he be missing? "He said he misses you," Kiran quipped. Chapter 340. "Miss me?" Wendell asked instinctively, but he soon regretted it. How could a dead man miss him? Was he trying to get him to die with him? He was not going to keep a dead man company. "Kiran, your sins will catch up with you, just you wait," Wendell said angrily. "I agree with what you said. Your sins will catch up with you too. You killed the York family, so now the York family will kill you. That's your fate," Kiran said in a cold, bloodthirsty tone. "Fate? Ha-ha," Wendell laughed heartily. "If you really want to bring fate into this, your fate is to die and reunite with the York family underground." "Good idea, but it's a pity it won't come true," Kiran responded calmly. "I don't care. I'm going to kill you right now." Wendell hung up. He knew very well that he could not kill Kiran, but he could not afford to back down. He was afraid of being refuted again, so he immediately hung up the phone. Zachary heard the dial tone and felt like he was holding a ticking bomb. He looked at Kiran nervously, wondering how to respond to him. Kiran's gaze fell on Zachary's face, and he said casually, "I heard that you give Power Hub Investment Group a report on Dragonsmount every year. Give me a copy of every year's report so I can look." "How did you know?" Zachary looked wary, wondering how Kiran knew this top secret. Kiran pointed at Marshall. "Your son obeys me now." "What?" Zachary was in disbelief. He was angry and utterly disappointed with his son. Marshall looked down shamefully at first, but mustered up the courage to look at his father and said, "Dad, we must survive in Bayville to secure our future." "Piece of shit," Zachary shouted at Marshall. "Are you not giving it to me? Do you still want to be Power Hub's lackey?" Kiran stared at Zachary. Zachary shivered in fear and said to Kiran, "Kiran, you don't want to know. Knowing too much about it is not a good thing." "Huh? Not a good thing?" Kiran drawled and rested his hand on the armrest. With force, he snapped the armrest, turning it into dust. Zachary's expression sank. Facing Kiran, he was in despair. "I didn't ask you where Power Hub is because I don't care when I asked you about the reports. Don't you know that I was showing you mercy by allowing you to live a few more days?" Kiran's tone was cold. Zachary's lips twitched and his gaze was alert. "I don't have to get what I want, but I just wonder." Kiran stood up and looked around before saying, "Will the Simmons family still exist tomorrow? It's hard to say." "Are you going to extinguish the Simmons family?" Zachary asked nervously. "It's up to you," Kiran emphasized. Zachary frowned, deep in thought as he weighed his options. Marshall broke into a cold sweat and dared not speak. He just kept glancing at his father and Kiran while fearing for his life. After hesitating a while, Zachary finally said to Kiran, "I can give it to you, but you have to promise not to tell anyone." Kiran was pleased to hear that, so he nodded. Zachary looked at Marshall and said, "Get the fuck out." Knowing his life had been spared, Marshall nodded repeatedly and scurried off. When only the two left, Zachary said, "Follow me to the study." Kiran followed him. Zachary moved the desk away and carefully lifted a tile on the floor. It was hollow, and there was a neat cloth bag inside. He took it out and opened it, revealing a stack of printed reports. He looked at Kiran and said, "This is the research data I've gathered at Dragonsmount over the years." Kiran was delighted to see the reports in front of him. Perhaps this was the secret to solving the mystery of Dragonsmount. He picked one up, which happened to be last year's report. He flipped through it and saw a clear picture of a realistic red dragon. Were there dragons in Dragonsmount? Kiran looked at Zachary. Zachary nodded seriously. "This is the photo I took in Dragonsmount." "Is there such a thing in Dragonsmount?" Kiran did not believe it, so he sought confirmation. Zachary nodded silently. "If you go look for it yourself, you might be able to see it. It's really strange. Since it's so strange, why don't the people in Power Hub go take a look themselves? Kiran asked. Solemnly. Die? Kiran asked. It's not that they don't want to, but every time they go, they'll die there, Zachary said. They all died. They died every year after they follow me in, Zachary reiterated. Why are you still alive then? Kiran stared at Zachary. Zachary shook his head thoughtfully. I don't know. Kiran stepped forward and grabbed Zachary's arm. Zachary thought that he was about to do something to him and was ready to fight back, but Kiran placed a hand on his pulse. His pulse seemed normal, but Kiran's curiosity was piqued. He ran his hand through Zachary's hair and plucked out a couple of strands. I don't know whether you're lying, but I will go back and look into it because I don't trust you. Zachary was not surprised. Don't worry, Mr. Kiran. Everything I said was true. You can look into it. He hesitated for a moment and said, You shouldn't go in hastily. If you do, you'll probably die. Why else would Power Hub rely on me? Wouldn't you be happy if I die? Kiran sneered. Zachary was silent. I've changed my mind. You can go to Dragonsmount in 3 days, and I will follow you, Kiran said to Zachary in all seriousness. When Zachary heard he was allowed to go to Dragonsmount, his eyes were filled with joy. Thank you, Mr. Kiran. You better not pull any tricks. Kiran saw through him. He picked up the bag with the reports and left the Simmonses' house. Zachary heaved a sigh of relief and fell to the ground. He could not figure out what Kiran was going to do. He wondered what Kiran would think after reading those reports. When Kiran came out, Marshall followed him like a dog, respectfully seeing him off. If the people from Power Hub Investment Group come again, let me know. I'll get rid of them, Kiran ordered before leaving. Don't worry, Mr. Kiran. I'll do my best, Marshall promised. You should do your best to survive. Kiran's words sounded like a warning to Marshall. Marshall froze. Meanwhile, Kiran was already on his way back to Xander Corporation with Zachary's hair strands and the reports. He was excited to read them. Snow had just arrived at the company. Unexpectedly, Yvonne was there too.